3, 2, 1.
Hi, welcome back to Show Me Trucks. In this video, I continue to work on the wood bed floor for the 67 four-wheel drive conversion. Trying to work on this truck from the bed towards the front. So let's get into this video. If you've never dealt with these trucks, these have a weird little washer. That way the carriage bolt doesn't spin, so it's offset. So to do this, I mark where that carriage bolt head is, and then I scoot over 3/16 of an inch and drill that, countersink that, and then I'll scoot back up 3/16 and then drill my offset hole. And that way, the carriage bolts sit in there. I know some guys probably recess that farther down so the carriage bolt head is totally down. I don't really like it because that just fills up with a bunch of junk and it's really hard to clean in there. Me, I'd rather put stuff on top of these carriage bolts than have that all the way down. And I want it as thick of wood underneath that as I can, so I didn't really want to do that. So I already did the driver's side. It's sitting in there pretty good. There's a lot of test fitting and things like that on this truck, so I know you can get on the internet and get all the measurements, but I like to bolt everything up, square up everything on the bed, and then get my own measurements. And these carriage bolts obviously have a little bit of play here and there. The same with almost all the holes are slotted, so you can move things around. The only thing I really do like to pay attention to is if your holes in your cross supports real off center, you'll think that you can tighten that carriage bolt down and it'll straighten the head out, but a lot of times it won't, and you'll have them kind of cockeyed in there. So sometimes you got to fine tune some things, or either fire the hole a little bit or narrow these. Like I had to narrow the skinny boards just a touch, because I was having trouble getting those bolts up there to sit down properly, and I might even narrow them a little bit more, because these beds, for one, if you've never dealt with one of these wooden beds, yes, they look super cool. They squeak a good amount, I won't lie. And you have to check the bolts every once in a while, because these are kind of like, they kind of spring and hold them down a little bit. So once the thing starts bouncing and flexing, those nuts will back out. So you want to check on that. But also, depending on the weather, the wood will expand and move around, and just wait till they start expanding and cracking and stuff like that, especially if you don't seal them well. I only did, I don't know, like 3 or 4 coats of polyurethane on my first time I did the 67 floor, and it didn't even last that summer. It was crazy. And it did sit outside all the time, so that was a little rough. Now I use Danish oil, so hopefully it's not as bad. So you do kind of want to leave a little bit of gap. You don't want that as tight as it can possibly be. I like it. It looks super tight, but a little bit of leeway is always good. So you guys working on these beds, especially if you've never done one of these before, a couple things to look out for is I always try to check this gap between my fender well and strip. That way it doesn't look wonky. Your eye can pick up little differences. So even up here, you know, it's a little bit smaller in the back. So whenever I marked all my holes, I kind of pushed that in. But I mark all my carriage bolt holes because it's going to have carriage bolts on here all the way around. These are the bigger ones. And like the back runs through your supports and your front runs through your supports, but none of these. That's just onto the wood. And I like to get everything in place. Also, you have to notch out here. There's kind of a little step underneath here. And so try to get all those marked. That way I can pull those boards off, because it's kind of a pain. You got to pull your fender wells off, pull this board off, and then put your little ones in, and then put that little one back in. And then also what I do is I leave extra in here, and I'm sure it's dark so you can't tell, but I leave all this extra wood in here. That way I can score that edge and trim that up. Because if you leave that long, it looks kind of dumb, but it's just like a little ledge for all the mud and dirt that hopefully you'll be flinging with these 33-inch tires, you know? It'll just it'll rot out your wood, and it just looks like a trashier build. So I just try to trim that. Obviously, pay attention so that you don't cut into where your bolts go through. You know, you want to leave a little meat on there, but I'm just going to cut mine straight down. You could angle it if you wanted to match the curve of fender wells, but I do have to fix one thing, and I remember this was kind of an issue before, but man, this side is off, like off. And if you measure the distance between this hole and this, between this in the front and this in the other side, this hole is just off, and this is kind of an aftermarket issue that you'll deal with. And so I'm gonna have to weld up this square hole. I had to drill this one, and I'll have to file that square and I'm gonna try to move it up that way just a touch. But you know, it looks a little off, which sucks, but it's just something you deal with a lot whenever you mess with this older stuff or aftermarket parts. That's why at swap meets everyone's asking crazy money for OEM NOS parts, you know. They just try to save you from having to mess with one hole, you know. But there's plenty of other stuff I have to do on this. You know, I need to weld up. My gas tank filler used to be here and run down into a hose for the LS engine, and it doesn't need to do that anymore. And obviously I need to clean all the black off here. If you'd ever seen this before, I actually grafted that whole bottom like 8 inches from a whole nother long bed fender, and try to get that all to match all the body lines. Another tip I have also is whenever you are bolting everything up, I would assume most of you guys, your front fender is going to have a little curve to it, kind of like mine still does, even though I reworked it and did all that. Recommend getting your wood seam in the back tight, tightening all this down, and leaving those front carriage bolts last. Because if all these are tight all the way around, all the way down, whenever you go to put those carriage bolts in, you could push that panel forward and then tighten it down, and it should stay there. But if you do it the opposite, you're not going to be able to pull this gap out. You can see what it's doing. It's trying to pull like a 1/4 inch gap. But obviously the back is what everyone sees, and the back's what you'll notice the most. So tighten that, get a nice tight edge. Make sure your front boards line up and that gap is good. You'll see different shows and things like that. A lot of guys just can't cut the same or measure, or I don't know what their issue is. But also another thing is, don't have your wood sticking past your stainless strips. So it just, to me, looks a little rough. So if you're gonna spend the time and money to make a nice wood floor look good, you know, spend a little more time to make it actually look good. So I had an accident, nothing big, but so I had cut all these and then drilled holes afterward. Well, obviously you'll have issues like this where we'll have little breakouts. So another tip, number 101. I had cut this long and notched it long. That way I had some extra pieces just in case anything happened. So I went ahead and drilled all these holes, and then now I'll cut all that out. That way it can't separate right there. So not a big deal. That way I don't have to totally notch a whole nother piece and remake everything. So it's kind of helpful to have a little bit of scrap. But obviously at $30 a board, you don't want to get too crazy. All right, well, I'm gonna wrap up this video. I ran out of stain, as you could probably see at the end of this video. So this is a dark walnut Danish oil. I try not to let big globs sit on there very long before I cover it. You'll kind of get dark spots on it. But I really pay attention to the top and the bottom. I try, but the bottom's not near as important to me. So again, I need to strip everything down on the sides and strip the front panel the rest of the way and clear coat everything. So I'm not near done. And now I'll do the other half, tomorrow. And then hopefully next week, I'll pull this whole bed off. I'm gonna strip the frame down, paint the frame just like I did these cross supports, and start plumbing. I'm basically gonna work this truck backwards. I'm gonna work on the bed and everything first, the back half of the frame, and start working towards the front. And the main reason I'm doing that is financials. I don't have money right now to buy an engine for it. I've been back and forth on the 5.3 or getting a 400 small block, and I think I'm going for the carbureted small block just to keep it easier, cheaper, and just sell it quick. So what I'm gonna do is work on everything from the back, which is more like manual labor, which obviously for me is free. And then I can buy the engine later and then mock that up. And then I can, do painting angle and a couple other things. But I do have most every other part for this. But the stuff I need to buy, I'm kind of waiting on a little bit. I need to finish this 36 computer issue. It's kind of sucking. I had to buy a bunch of different apps for my computer so that I can tune it. So, just dropped $1,000 on computer stuff, which is not my favorite right now. This is my favorite project on these trucks. I think working on something that you actually see instead of mechanicals up underneath the truck that no one cares about or ever sees. I also like doing all that fabrication, but I like working on nice fancy looking stuff. So I hope this turns out good in the end. I think the nice silver finish like this inside the bed, and then the darker wood. And then I have on my old school camper, if you haven't seen any of those videos, it's silver on the sides and it's got a brown strip, and then the inside of the cab will be all raw, and then it's all brown vinyl in there. So thanks for watching. I hope you guys try to make a wood floor for your truck. I think they look really good. Later.